Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Two cases involving Taiwanese criminal suspects in a fraud ring operating abroad are in news. In Kenya, which has an extradition treaty with China, suspects were arrested and deported to the mainland. In Malaysia, however, suspects were sent to Taiwan, where Beijing urges the authorities to deliver true justice for their mainland victims. Perhaps inevitably, politics have entered into both cases. So what are the relevant legal considerations in dealing with the incidents? How do politics influence perception when cross-strait relations are involved? And how will justice be served for both suspects and victims? To discuss these questions and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Edward Lehman, Managing Director of the law firm Lehman, Lee & Xu, Gregory Yingnian Zhang, Taiwan Affairs commentator, and Dr. Zhong Hotao, Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. But before we begin our discussion, let's take a quick look at this.
Two cases involving Taiwanese fraud suspects are drawing global attention. On Saturday morning, Taiwan police released 20 suspects who were deported from Malaysia, citing a lack of evidence. These suspects were among 52 people who were earlier arrested in Malaysia for telecom fraud, in which many victims are mainland citizens. Despite Beijing's request, the Taiwan Authority sought to prevent its citizens from being deported to the Chinese mainland. Malaysian officials said another 32 suspects from Taiwan will also be sent to the island. And last week, police in Kenya deported 77 Chinese telecom fraud suspects, including 45 Taiwanese, to the Chinese mainland.
两岸对犯罪嫌疑人的处理
Because the Chinese mainland and Taiwan handle criminal suspects separately, a lot of repeat offenders from the Taiwan side involved in telecommunications fraud have not received their due punishment, and the money cannot be retrieved. There were also several suspects released once they were returned to Taiwan. Some of them started the criminal activities again overseas. The public of the Chinese mainland has voiced opposition and called to crack down on those criminal suspects and get their money back.
The Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council says releasing telecom fraud suspects will make telecom fraud activity worse. They hope Taiwan police will alter their policy and avoid jeopardizing cross-strait cooperation. Chairperson of Taiwan's Kuomintang party, Hong Xiu-chu, said the Pan-Green camp shouldn't use the issue to raise confrontation across the strait, and she called for collaboration from both sides to crack down on telecom fraud. The number of similar cases has been on the rise in recent years. In 2010, 14 suspects from Taiwan were involved in another telecom fraud case in the Philippines. The suspects received a light punishment, provoking protests from the mainland, where most of the victims were located.
Dr. Zhong, are you surprised that the suspects were deported to Taiwan instead of being sent to mainland?
I'm not surprised. Actually, according to the international practice, those suspects should be sent to where they departed from. Those suspects to Malaysia, and originally they departed from Taiwan. They did not departed from Chinese mainland, so it is okay for Malaysia.
Excuse me, let me clarify. Are you saying depart or deport?
Depart.
Oh, they left Taiwan.
Yeah,
they
left
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's their home place. So,
yeah.
But there's another argument talking about the victims are mainland China. Therefore, if those suffered are mainland China, then mainland China has jurisdiction to look over those suspects. So in this case, is this argument? I don't think it's a one case say go back to Taiwan. I don't think that is true.
No, I mean I mean extradition and treaties, like the professor was talking about, those are those are set group of rules. When you depart one place, then you have to be returned to that particular place. But like Gregory was saying, and there's many such cases in China where there are murders that are committed abroad. Two Chinese nationals in America and New Zealand, one murders the other, comes back to China. The cases are tried here. There's jurisdiction over that action abroad in China. That's the way the Chinese law looks at it. So I mean, there's arguments to be made on either side, and certainly it depends on which argument which approach you're going to be taking. Whether it seems in many of these cases with these telecom hotbox frauds that the perpetrated, the victims are really Chinese nationals in mainland China, and that they're these acts are being performed abroad. Could be in Taiwan as well. It's a little unclear from the reports and the data that we have, but it seems that the victims are
But
here.
gentlemen, back in 2009, a landmark legal document was signed by two sides of the Taiwan Strait. It's called the Cross-Strait Crime Fighting and Judicial Mutual Assistance Agreement. That was signed between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. So what do you think would be the most likely response from Tsai Ing-wen, the chairwoman of DPP, which won the campaign, which will take over power from Ma Ying-jeou on May the 20th?
I hope Tsai Ing-wen would continue to exercise this important agreement. Actually, in the past, this agreement has played an important role in the relationship between the two sides. And in the past several years, the two sides has made lots of exercises in Southeast China. Asian countries, and they conducted more than 50 times, and they had brought more than 7,000 suspects from those countries, including more than 5,000 Taiwanese suspects. So from these data, you could find this agreement really is very important and has achieved a lot. So both sides should cherish this achievement. From this point, Tsai Ing-wen should continue to abide by this agreement. I hope so.
But I'm afraid, Gregory, Tsai Ing-wen is a chairwoman of DPP, which is a pro-secession political force in Taiwan.
Correct.
Yet this landmark legal document between Taiwan and the mainland is actually based on the principle of one China. Tsai Ing-wen refuses to accept the one China principle. So far, in all her interviews with the media, she had been very ambiguous about this principle, and that's why the Taiwanese Affairs Office of the State Council in the mainland has been angry, demanding recognition of this principle. Without this principle, I'm afraid Tsai Ing-wen will not be able to continue to comply with the spirit of this landmark legal document. What do you think of our concern?
Of course, in 2009, this agreement was signed, and we have ACFA following that. I think Tsai Ing-wen is now in a very delicate and troublesome position herself, facing pressures coming inside the island, those who are pro-independence, urging her to do things going to a certain direction, and the American expectations don't like to see Taiwan become a troublemaker. At the same time, China has laid down this right line. You have to recognize the 1992 consensus. I do believe this agreement, the joint crime-fighting agreement, is a good one, because in the past it proved to be workable. For example, there were Taiwan suspects sent to mainland China first, then went back to Taiwan. Those came originally from.
We have no questions about the legal aspects to this case. That's a real test of the mutual trust, if any, across the Taiwan Strait. I'm talking about whether politics has entered into this case.
I agree.
So the one China principle is indeed a touchstone of politics and mutual trust across the Taiwan Strait.
I agree. That's a very troublesome issue facing both sides of Taiwan Straits in the circumstances. But I don't think, at this point, I think Tsai Ing-wen would have enough wisdom to decide they cannot use this issue as a starting point to emphasize or to promote anti-mainland China activities. She should seize this as an opportunity, to allow this case to go judicially correct and unbiased. If, for example, if the suspect has to be punished, then go back to Taiwan or start in the United States. It started in mainland China first. I read the media from Taiwan recently. There were strong voices coming from the lawmakers in the legislative yuan and also media experts claiming that Taiwan's law are too easy for the criminals to go easy. Therefore, they should change the law, make the pay a heavy cost. Right. This case is a good start.
Yeah, right. Right. I agree. I mean, it can be everything can be used for politics, and I mean, but this is about fighting crime, and I think that the people in Taiwan recognize that as well, which is And this is what the point is from a legal perspective, from what I've read, which is exactly the same thing, that Taiwan doesn't have, at this point in time, maybe the UN will change that, but a very strong on telecoms crime, and that the mainland has a better breadth of laws and regulations on telecoms crime. And so there have been quite a few cases where Taiwanese have been involved in the past, and these prison sentences have ranged anywhere from 2.5 years to about 12 years that I've seen so far. And under the Taiwan law, from what I understand, it would be maybe the maximum would be 4 years in any of these given cases. So that's not justice for the crime.
The most important thing is not just to revise those laws. The most important, I think, is to put those laws into practice, to execute that laws. According to the current laws in Taiwan, that is one case, one penalty. If one suspect committed different crimes, then maybe he could be sentenced into prison for more than 20 years. So that's okay. So the most important thing is how to put it into practice, not just, not just to give them light punishment.
But we have one of the legitimate reasons to push for the case for those suspects to be put on trial. What do you think of the necessity of obtaining evidence from the mainland through the legal channel?
Yeah, no, I mean, we have to look at the 2009 agreement.
These guys were released upon their arrival in Taiwan. I mean, now the next issue to be asked and to be addressed for both sides of the Taiwan Strait is whether these guys should be held back and under house arrest, pending investigation.
Well, certainly, again, even though we talked about the point of departure was Taiwan, Malaysia has, for example, in the Malaysian case, has the diplomatic relations with mainland China. That's who they recognize, and so there is kind of confusion over how that should be adjudicated. But no, I mean, it isn't the case where someone should go free and they should be under house arrest. That there should be, under the 2009 agreement, some way to keep this in check. This is about crime. This is not about, and to a certain extent, an argument can be made by the mainland that they were imitating, from what I understand of the crime, police authorities, judicial authorities, financial authorities in the mainland, not in Taiwan, but in the mainland, to dupe mainland people out of money from their bank accounts. So, I mean, this is a very difficult thing, and if Taiwan wanted to use it as a wedge, political wedge, it's not a good one, I think, to promote crime.
Gregory, do you think these guys, the suspect, should be put on watch list pending investigation? Well, the release of those criminal suspects is one thing. To put them on the watch list is quite another, because there is, after all, this landmark legal document that was signed in 2009. And therefore, Dr. Zhong argued clearly that a process should be inaugurated for the two sides to take a second look at the necessity of their cooperation, paving the way for trust to be built between the two sides following the new inaugural ceremony on May the 20th, right?
Well, I think, I go back to agreement again, I think the spirit and the intent of agreement is to solve the problems not once for all, but in a more effective way. Therefore, experts and authority on both sides of the Taiwan Strait should exchange information, send the criminals back and forth, and be able to work as a team. One reason we have to punish those guys severely, because once they get given a lighter sentence, they become experienced criminals. Next time around, they do even more, because they think it's good business. I cheated $1 million, now I put in the jail for 10 days and only paid 5,000 RMB. Let's do it again. So there's no reason to argue with reason, either emotions, your goodwill, whatever, punish them. In this case, we have to re-examine the whole system, make sure the two sides on Taiwan Strait work closely, like brothers, like partners, whatsoever, to crack down this crime and other crime as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, because the cost-benefit analysis, like you said, is to commit the crime, and the minimum penalties are very small, and so some people would elect to say, I'll do even my time in jail as long as I can get the money back. In some instances, the fines are relatively small, and if you broke it down like the professor said, one time for one time, each act is a particular crime, then you're talking about something substantial and deterrent. But the politics getting involved in it, I think, is not a positive thing for anybody, both sides of the straits.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You are watching Dialogue with Dr. Zhong Hotel, Gregory Nanzhang, and Edward Lehman. We are discussing whether yet another lawsuit across the Taiwan Strait will involve the prospects of this very fragile relationship following the upcoming May the 20th inaugural ceremony of Tsai Ing-wen, chairwoman of DPP, who won the local race not long ago. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us. Welcome back. Before the inaugural ceremony on May the 20th, I believe the outgoing leader of Taiwan, Mr. Ma Ying-jeou, must have been wrestling with different options on the table as to how to handle the suspects that were deported from Malaysia to Taiwan. Because don't forget, his decision for releasing those suspects was made perhaps against the background that DPP members from the Pan-Green camp demanded immediate release of Chen Shui-bian, the top criminal of a corruption case.
Right.
So do you think Mr. Ma Ying-jeou is coming under huge pressure, and therefore he decided to release those suspects to alleviate the pressure politically?
No, impossible. I think Ma Ying-jeou will not release Chen Shui-bian. If he do release Chen Shui-bian, then the Pan-Blue camp will blame Ma Ying-jeou. And another important reason is that for Ma Ying-jeou he himself, that Chen Shui-bian is indeed committed crime, so he should be punished. He should not be released. So from these several points, we could conclude that for Ma Ying-jeou, impossible for him to.
Let me add something to that. I think the reason for the Green camp at this point to put pressure on Ma Ying-jeou to release, to a special pardon for Chen Shui-bian is the past is hot potato to Ma Ying-jeou. If you don't do it, they claim this is an action to pacify, to make the two parties working together. That was a terrible excuse. Because in this case, Chen Shui-bian is the shame of Taiwan. He has the claim of son of Taiwan, become the criminal of Taiwan. So he's on the highest position as a leader, and using these names of raising funds for Taiwan independence whatsoever is just a cover-up. So I do not believe Ma Ying-jeou would follow this trap to release at all. Therefore, the question is for Tsai Ing-wen to handle when she's in charge 2 months from now. She's facing great pressure. I don't think she can handle it right. So this could be one of the reasons for DPP to go down the drain maybe 4 years from now, particularly if Taiwan does not keep track of what's happening on this side and China be able to work together positively, economic and other areas, and the economy is going down the drain. 4 years later, there you go. That's what I predict.
Now, we're talking about politics in Taiwan, but what about the alleged politics between Malaysia and China? Due to the maritime disputes in the South China Sea, some observers in Taiwan pointed out recently, perhaps Kuala Lumpur used this opportunity to highlight the embarrassment of China. China doesn't think we are isolated in the disputes between China and other claimants in the South China Sea. However, Malaysia is one of the parties. So, do you think China has failed, allegedly, to exercise diplomatic influence over the deportation of those criminal suspects from Malaysia to Taipei?
No, I don't think the Chinese mainland failed in this issue. Actually, as I just said, the reason why those suspects were deported to Taiwan is they departed from one of the international airports in Taiwan. So it is okay for Malaysia to deport those suspects to Taiwan. And another reason is, the Chinese mainland and Malaysia has diplomatic relationship, and they also have some treaty on extradition. So maybe in future, there are still some other suspects in Malaysia. Maybe those suspects will be brought to Chinese mainland. I hope so.
I have another interpretation. I think this time Malaysia sent those 20 suspects back to Taiwan. They were released the next day, right on Friday. So has actually disturbed everyone on both sides of the streets. I hope Malaysia will learn a lesson from this. next time they would be thinking 3 times over if you do this easily. So it could be a good turnaround.
Right.
Because by doing that, it's not a promotion of China-Malaysian relationship. It's not getting any support or thanks from Taiwan. So what's what to do this for? So learn a lesson from that. I hope that is true.
Well, gentlemen, since democracy started to be practiced seriously in Taiwan, maybe 2 decades ago, allegedly, many here in the mainland may have taken it for granted that, okay, you are the two-party system, fine, it's your business, right? It's a local election, so on and so forth. But the rule of law is very different. Today, we talk about whether this legal case has been politicized or not. Now, is it a wise idea to separate politics from the legal case? Give Taiwan a chance to prove that it is serious about the rule of law, okay? Don't use the politics to poison, the sense of justice. The sense of justice is just about justice, right?
It should be. I mean, I think that the older I get, the longer that I've been practicing law, I'm not always sure that that's the case. I mean, even in the United States with Mark Rich being granted the pardon just before in the waning days of the Clinton administration, which is now coming up again in the election. So you see these kinds of things, these lame ducks, where the pardons are able to happen by presidents. So it does happen. Is that justice? Is hard to say. I mean, it's as much justice as Mark Rich could afford, I guess. And so that's unfortunate for the rest of us that have to live by that. We hope that justice is blind. And so, right, I hope it isn't politicized, and I hope that programs like this and the agreements are the type of things that are the catalyst to move us forward as a group together, whether it's Taiwan Straits or other places.
Gregory, many in the mainland, I believe, prefer to believe that the sense of justice starts to pervade every aspect of the Taiwan authorities following the inauguration of democratic elections there with the end of the Kuomintang dictatorship. But to my knowledge, many in Taiwan are actually scared by the idea of having so much fraudulent behavior and illegal activities in Taiwan. They hate this idea that the image of Taiwan might be poisoned and destroyed by those outlaws. So do you think, in fact, the public opinion in Taiwan has been very supportive of this idea that legal cooperation across the Taiwan Strait should be enhanced instead of being undermined this time around?
It's quite true, because to Taiwan, the safety, the economic prosperity, also the harmony in society and good interactions with China, the first top priorities. Of course, they're concerned about it. For example, if things went wrong in Taiwan, going to the other extreme, like to give these criminals a chance to go free, and also give Tsai Ing-wen a chance to promote anti-China activities. In the long run, Taiwan would suffer. The people would suffer themselves. So I think they have a reason to be concerned. They like to see the practices in Taiwan are in good shape.
I just want to add one point that we should fully consider the public opinion in Chinese mainland, not only just the Taiwanese public opinion. In the past, the Chinese mainland, most people believe that the most beautiful scene in Taiwan is Taiwanese. But now, these two incidents change a lot. Maybe in future, the Chinese mainland, the common people may believe that Taiwan is just a heaven or paradise of all suspect.
That would be ugly. That would be a nasty image for Taiwan. I don't think Taiwanese would accept this tendency. But let's look at the considerations of Tsai Ing-wen at this moment. So far, she's been pretty quiet. Why?
Well, she has this reputation of being the one to engineer this two-China policy when she was assisting Li Denghui as in charge of Taiwan affairs, mainland affairs. So in her heart, perhaps she's intended to do something going in that direction. At the same time, she's realistic. I mean, to face the reality, knowing that to keep DPP in power, to give her a chance for a second term, things have to be done. Not only to please the voters in Taiwan, but also not to offend mainland China to the extent of destroy Taiwan's future. At the same time, not opposing the United States wishes to do things just the opposite. So she's actually traveled on this balance act. You know, on cable or a wire is tough. I don't know. I think the best thing for her to do is to do things for both sides of Taiwan Straits.
You know, Dr. Zhong, I'm
Yeah.
impressed by at least 2 points she made very clearly during some of the media interviews after winning the elections. She said, first of all, she would follow the public opinions of the
Exactly.
mainland, respecting democracy, so to
Yeah.
speak. And then she would vow to maintain the status quo of Taiwan Strait
Exactly.
without jeopardizing or unilaterally provoking the status quo across the Taiwan Strait. That means, despite her reluctance to accept the one-China principle, as part of the status quo, we have the 2009 Mutual Assistance Agreement in repatriating the suspects to each other. So, what do you think of the mental struggle for her to handle this case? On the one hand, she got to respect the status quo, part of which is the landmark legal document signed in 2009. On the other hand, she refuses to accept the One China principle.
Yeah, exactly. That is
The One China principle, by the way, is of course a very important, perhaps the most important part, if not the cornerstone for the status quo.
Yeah, that is Tsai Ing-wen is facing a dilemma. She has to make a choice between these two poles. I think if she has enough wisdom, she should choose the One China principle to accept 1992 consensus. Otherwise, she will not be able to maintain she called the status quo. And the most important reason is that the Taiwan's economy is highly related to Chinese mainland. More than 40% of Taiwan goods or commodity is to Chinese mainland. If the cross-strait relationship is going down, then the Taiwan's economy will be going down.
You know, a few weeks ago, China resumed and restored diplomatic relations with the Gambia, a very small and poverty-stricken country in Africa. Upon this restoration of diplomatic relationship, the spokeswoman or spokesperson from Taipei, particularly from the DPP, said Tsai Ing-wen wanted the mainland to accumulate enough goodwill so that her inaugural speech on May the 20th would also release some kind of a goodwill to lay groundwork for building the mutual trust, which is very fragile across the Taiwan Strait. Now, of course, the mainland is watching out for her to build trust, to accumulate sufficient goodwill this time around. Then what do you think would be the most legitimate and likely response from this chairwoman? I mean, this upcoming...
She might go one step further. For example, her past interpretation of 1992 consensus is a fact. He will not use consensus as such, but if something happened in that year, you know, something like that, but she cannot this time to delay some type of formal recognition by saying something as blurred, as so flexible as that. But to what extent he will define her acceptance of 1992 consensus, something to be guessed by everyone. I don't know what that is.
Okay, let's return to the principle of respecting rule of law. Sure. Okay, you are a legal expert. So what do you think would be the most likely outcome, since we have signed an agreement across the Taiwan Strait about respecting each other's rule of law?
Right, well, I mean, it depends on the trier of fact, but I mean, from a rule of law perspective, you know, it would tend to be that the crime was committed in mainland China, and that these should be adjudicated. There should be some allocation by not letting these people go free. They should actually come back to the mainland, and they should have prosecution here in the mainland. That would be the fair way to go, I think, and the legal way to go. Now, what's happened is obviously is something completely different, but I mean, there's still time to rectify that.
I hope your American friends, and many of whom gave the Western media report, would agree with you, because their views may have been politicized. With that, we come to the end of this edition of Dialogue. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.